Did you just forget who you were serving? Daniel Whitman's words cut through the clatter of the busy Manhattan cafe like a sharp knife. But Chloe Bennett didn't flinch, didn't even lift her eyes beyond the menu she was setting down on the table across from him, her fingers brushing the edge of the polished wood with deliberate care, each movement calm, controlled, purposeful. Chloe had been working here for 5 years, every shift a careful choreography of smiles, nods, and efficient service that left her customers impressed but never aware of the full measure of her skill. And Daniel, dressed in a tailored navy suit that cost more than Chloe's monthly rent, leaned back in his chair, tapping the silver watch on his wrist with a smirk, certain he was in control of every inch of this room, certain that his presence alone imposed order, until she spoke, her voice steady, quiet, but full of weight. "Sir, may I remind you that the special today is roasted duck with truffle glaze, not the ribeye you asked for." And Daniel froze mid-smile, a flicker of surprise crossing his face as he registered that she wasn't just reciting the menu. She understood it. She knew it. She observed everything. His tone of superiority met with the soft, unwavering gaze of someone who refused to be intimidated, and the room seemed to narrow, the chatter fading as Chloe moved from table to table with a grace that belied her uniform, the black vest and crisp white shirt spotless, pressed, every fold perfectly in place. Yet the way she carried herself spoke of far more than a simple waitress. It spoke of discipline, intelligence, and an unshakable quiet dignity that Daniel hadn't expected to encounter in someone he had initially dismissed. His curiosity piqued despite himself. He watched as she balanced plates, poured coffee, and navigated around the cluster of patrons without a single misstep, her eyes occasionally flicking up to meet his for a fraction of a second before returning to her task. That small acknowledgement enough to make him aware that her presence demanded attention even when she didn't ask for it. Daniel cleared his throat, attempting to regain the upper hand. "I asked for your opinion on my wine selection," he said, the amusement in his voice forced. But Chloe merely nodded politely, not rushing, not showing any hint of irritation, her lips curling into the smallest, enigmatic smile. "I recommend the 2019 Sonoma Valley Reserve," she replied softly, each word measured, confident, and Daniel's eyes widened as he realized she wasn't repeating what she'd read in a guide. She was giving her own considered judgment. The way she spoke conveyed knowledge, taste, refinement, and a quiet authority he hadn't anticipated in a server, and the hum of the cafe seemed to fall away entirely as he absorbed this. The clicks of heels, the clatter of silverware, the distant hiss of the espresso machine fading into the background, leaving only the tension, the unspoken challenge between them. Daniel leaning forward slightly, compelled by a mix of intrigue and disbelief. Chloe moving with the steady rhythm of someone who knew her space, her limitations, and yet moved within them as if commanding a stage. Then a tray of sparkling water caught her attention, and she approached with effortless poise, placing it in front of him without spilling a drop, the condensation glinting under the warm overhead lights. "Thank you, Miss Bennett," he said, his voice barely masking the surprise, and she inclined her head slightly, eyes calm, unreadable, a faint hint of amusement dancing in the corners. Daniel's mind racing as he tried to reconcile the image of this composed, graceful young woman with the person he had assumed would be intimidated. He had underestimated her, and that realization burned at the edges of his pride. Chloe moved back to tend other tables, each step precise, each motion deliberate, yet casual, a paradox that held him, drawing his attention even as he tried to turn it elsewhere, his phone buzzing, unnoticed, a reminder of meetings, schedules, stock prices. And yet he ignored it, caught in the gravity of her quiet presence, and when she returned to retrieve his empty cup, she said with the same calm clarity, "Your check is ready, sir," and handed it to him without a hint of ceremony or apology. Daniel stared at her, his brow furrowed, a flash of incredulity passing through his expression, realizing that someone he had initially dismissed could command such authority with nothing but composure and presence. Chloe paused just long enough to give him a final glance, a glance that said more than words ever could, and as she turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of a keycard tucked into her apron, polished, sleek, metallic, and in that instant, Daniel's mind raced. the pieces clicking into place, the image of the penthouse atop the building. The realization that she was not just a waitress but the owner, the orchestrator of her own world, a quiet power that didn't need to shout, didn't need to flaunt, and Daniel leaned back, stunned, the clink of the check folder against the table like a punctuation mark to the revelation, the cafe resuming its normal hum around them. But for Daniel, the moment lingered, a suspended heartbeat of disbelief and admiration. As Chloe moved away, the faintest smile curving her lips, leaving Daniel to wonder silently. How had he overlooked someone so completely, someone so quietly formidable? And what other surprises might this composed, graceful figure hold as she disappeared among the tables, leaving the air charged with curiosity and the promise of revelation just beyond his reach? Chloe Bennet moved through the restaurant with effortless precision, her movements a quiet ballet between tables, balancing trays with drinks and dishes while never breaking her calm. The soft chatter of customers, the hum of the espresso machine, and the clinking of silverware forming a steady background rhythm that she seemed to conduct with subtle authority. Daniel Whitman observed from his corner table, leaning slightly forward, elbows resting on the polished surface, eyes tracking every deliberate motion, a mixture of fascination and disbelief coursing through him as he realized he had underestimated her entirely. She was more than competent. She commanded attention without demanding it, a silent force of intelligence and dignity. And when she approached his table again with a fresh pour of sparkling water, Daniel noticed the way she kept her shoulders squared, posture straight, every gesture precise, conveying professionalism layered with confidence. Her glance briefly flickering toward him as if aware of his scrutiny. Yet she offered no acknowledgement, no invitation for conversation, just a calm presence that seemed to fill the space more than his own words or status ever could. Daniel shifted in his seat, trying to piece together the sudden impression of authority that radiated from someone he had labeled a waitress. He had seen dozens of servers today, none moved with such quiet command. None held themselves with such balance between humility and presence. Chloe bent slightly to set down a small plate of dessert, her auburn hair falling softly around her face, catching the overhead lights and framing the thoughtful expression that had Daniel leaning in without realizing it. A subtle sigh escaping him as he registered the stark contrast between her unassuming exterior and the undeniable aura of control she projected. She straightened, moving back to the other tables. And Daniel followed with his gaze, the rational part of his mind noting that her efficiency was almost mechanical, practiced to perfection, while the emotional part wrestled with the allure of her quiet confidence, the curiosity of how someone so seemingly ordinary could project such extraordinary composure. And as he watched, Chloe paused at a nearby table, engaging a family with gentle words, soft smiles, patient attention. Daniel noted the way she listened, really listened, and responded with measured insights, every action conveying that her presence mattered more than any title or wealth. He found himself leaning back, tapping his fingers against the table absent-mindedly, mind racing with questions about her life, her background, her knowledge, the source of this impeccable poise. And just as he was about to call over a waiter to check the bill, Chloe returned, sliding it across with an unassuming grace, her eyes meeting his for the briefest instant, conveying recognition of his attention without arrogance. Daniel felt a flicker of respect stir within him, mingled with disbelief. This was not the same person he had first dismissed moments ago. Chloe's steps took her toward the kitchen, and he watched her go, realizing that each motion was deliberate, calculated, yet completely natural, a rhythm that suggested hours of practice, careful cultivation of presence and awareness. And the realization hit him fully when he noticed the subtle keychain dangling from her apron, gleaming in the afternoon light, a hint at ownership and authority he had not anticipated. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly, an unfamiliar sensation of humility brushing his pride. Chloe moved back toward the tables, attending to a group of elderly patrons with patience and warmth. Daniel's eyes never left her, trying to absorb every detail. The slight curve of her lips as she reassured them, the way her hands moved without hesitation, the careful attention to timing and placement of each item, all creating a portrait of competence that spoke louder than any words could. And in that moment, He understood that Chloe's influence extended beyond the confines of the cafe, that her calm command, her quiet authority, and her impeccable attention to detail defined a presence that could shape any room she entered, and Daniel found himself leaning forward, intrigued, alert, realizing that every small gesture, every slight movement was a signal of intelligence, awareness, and poise that demanded recognition. The soft light catching the reflection in her eyes as she glanced toward the windows. A fleeting acknowledgement of the city beyond the cafe, the penthouses above, the streets below, and Daniel's mind raced with the possibilities, with the unknown depths of Chloe Bennet. And as she returned to check on another table, leaving Daniel to sit with a mixture of awe and anticipation, he could not shake the question forming in his mind. How had he so completely misjudged someone who walked with the quiet power of someone who knew exactly who she was and what she could command? And as the afternoon light shifted across the room, illuminating Chloe's meticulous movements, Daniel Whitman remained frozen, caught in the gravity of presence, intelligence, and the undeniable aura of someone who had quietly claimed authority over her world without saying a single word, leaving him to wonder silently what other layers, other revelations might unfold before the end of the day. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through the large cafe windows, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors as Chloe Bennet continued her rhythm of service, moving between tables with a quiet elegance that seemed to slow time around her. Daniel Whitman watched from his corner, eyes narrowing slightly as he tried to anticipate her next move. But every time he thought he had her figured out, she shifted seamlessly, interacting with the customers with patience and insight, adjusting orders, suggesting pairings, noting preferences, all with an effortless grace that made him realize he had been entirely wrong in underestimating her. His mind a whirl of admiration and disbelief, each motion of hers a subtle assertion of command, a demonstration that authority did not always announce itself with volume or status. She carried it quietly, naturally, inherently. And Daniel felt a growing tension inside him, the need to understand, to measure, to know exactly how someone so unassuming could radiate such certainty and competence. Chloe moved to a table where a young couple was deciding between desserts, kneeling slightly to offer a recommendation, her voice soft, melodic, and yet carrying a confidence that made them lean in, nodding appreciatively at her guidance. Daniel caught the flicker of light in her eyes, a subtle spark that spoke of intellect, of careful thought, of someone accustomed to observing, analyzing, and executing with precision. He shifted in his chair, the weight of his own assumptions pressing against him, the realization that he had judged too quickly, too superficially, gnawing at the edges of his pride. And as Chloe returned to the side station to collect empty plates, Daniel's gaze followed the curve of her movement, noting how she straightened a chair here, adjusted a napkin there, gestures so small, so seemingly insignificant, yet executed with such intent that they revealed a meticulous attention to detail, a mindfulness rare in anyone, let alone someone in a position he had considered subordinate. The murmurs of other patrons faded into the background, the faint hum of conversation, the clinking of cutlery, all dimmed as his focus honed in on her, the rhythm of her day unfolding like a dance he had not been invited to participate in. And when she paused to set a tray of beverages before an elderly couple, Daniel noticed how she tilted her head, listening intently, nodding subtly, her reactions measured, empathetic, yet professional. A perfect balance of warmth and composure. He felt a tug of respect mixed with intrigue, and awareness that the person before him was not merely performing a role, but commanding her environment in a way that transcended the title of waitress. She moved back toward the main floor, her steps measured, yet fluid, and Daniel leaned forward, elbows on the table, studying her, aware of the sharpness of her mind mirrored in the calm confidence of her body, every motion deliberate, every glance calculated to maintain grace and control. And then she paused at the register, retrieving a small notepad, writing something quickly, glancing once toward Daniel, the subtle gesture catching his attention, hinting at a layer of responsibility, oversight, perhaps even ownership, that he had not anticipated, a quiet revelation stirring in him as he recognized that the woman he had dismissed moments ago held power in ways he could scarcely imagine. The evening light deepened, casting a golden glow over her hair and the floor around her, highlighting the precision in her movements, the careful orchestration of her day. And Daniel's pulse quickened, a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty threading through him, every instinct urging him to understand her, to unravel the story behind the composure, the intelligence, the quiet authority. Chloe adjusted the position of a chair at a corner table, the small act signaling an awareness of her surroundings, an ownership of the space, and Daniel could not look away, the admiration growing with each passing second, each subtle decision, each deliberate step. And as she moved back toward the kitchen to prepare for the evening rush, her half-smile glanced in his direction, carrying a weight of unspoken understanding, a hint that she knew more, that she had planned more, that she held the room, the cafe, and now him, in a balance that was entirely her own. And Daniel leaned back, exhaling slowly, the lesson settling quietly. That power could be soft, authority could be unseen, and the quiet ones, the careful, the observant, could command more than those who shouted, who displayed, who assumed. And in that lingering moment, as Chloe disappeared briefly behind the kitchen curtain, Daniel Whitman was left to wonder, to wait, and to anticipate. What revelation, what subtle assertion of mastery would emerge next? The unfolding of her day, promising further insight into the depth, the skill, and the quiet dominion of Chloe Bennett. The evening rush began to settle, the last murmurs of conversation fading into the soft hum of the cafe's lights, and Chloe Bennett moved with the same deliberate rhythm she had maintained all day, plates stacked neatly in her arms, a tray of espresso sliding across the counter with precise ease. Daniel Whitman's gaze remained fixed on her, the subtle shift in the lighting catching the auburn highlights in her hair, the faint reflection of the city outside glinting off the polished silverware she arranged. He noticed the small details he had missed before, the careful alignment of napkins, the spacing of cutlery, the way she adjusted chairs not out of necessity, but to maintain harmony, a quiet command of her environment, a mastery of space that was unspoken yet undeniable. He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on the table, the weight of his curiosity pressing against him as he watched her engage a family near the window, her soft voice guiding a young boy through the choices of desserts with patience, each suggestion measured, thoughtful. And Daniel could not help but recognize the intelligence behind the calm exterior, the strategic attention that allowed her to anticipate questions, preempt concerns, and create a seamless experience for every patron in the room. Chloe moved to a side station to gather fresh orders, and he saw the faintest flicker of acknowledgement in her eyes when she caught his glance. Not challenging, not provoking, simply aware, and it unsettled him more than any confrontation could. The realization that he had misjudged her gnawed at his composure. Each moment she passed by, each step deliberate yet fluid, reinforcing that authority and competence did not require proclamation. That presence alone could command respect. Daniel's hand drifted to his glass of water, twisting it absent-mindedly as he absorbed the subtle mastery of her movements, the careful balance between efficiency and grace. Chloe returned to his table with a perfectly timed refill, setting it down with an effortless smile, her eyes calm, her demeanor steady, and he caught the way she measured the space between herself and him, maintaining professionalism while subtly signaling that she was aware of his scrutiny. Daniel's thoughts raced, the familiar certainty of wealth and power no longer providing the reassurance it usually did. The quiet control she exhibited rendered status irrelevant. She was in her element, and he, the investor used to command, found himself observing, analyzing, but without leverage, watching someone whose competence exceeded the confines of her uniform. The cafe lights reflected off her watch, the glint highlighting the precision with which she checked her timing. Every second accounted for, every movement intentional, a choreography of awareness and control. She moved to another table, balancing a tray of desserts while offering a warm smile to a young couple, guiding them through choices with insight. And Daniel noticed how she maintained eye contact, nodded subtly, gestured efficiently, each action layered with intention, and he leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly, realizing the profound impact of someone who understood their environment, their role, and the expectations of those around them. Without a word, a presence that spoke louder than any title, any display of wealth. Chloe approached the counter again, gathering dishes for cleaning, her movements unhurried, precise, and Daniel could not take his eyes off her. The measured poise, the quiet confidence, the balance between humility and command, it all conveyed a story, one he was only beginning to comprehend. She straightened a chair near the corner, adjusted a napkin, ever so slightly, a gesture almost imperceptible but executed with such intention it caught his attention. The subtlety of control, of ownership, threaded through her every action. Daniel felt a tug of both admiration and humility, a quiet lesson forming in the depths of his awareness. The room seemed to hold its breath, the soft ambient noise fading into the background as he watched Chloe navigate her domain. And when she returned to check on a table near the window, her glance briefly met his. And in that instant, Daniel understood. The measure of a person was revealed not in proclamation or display, but in the careful, deliberate choices that shaped their world around them. The silent assertion of authority, the quiet command of attention, the power and dignity. And as she moved once more toward the kitchen, leaving the floor in seamless order, Daniel remained seated, absorbing the lesson, the intrigue, the subtle reversal unfolding before him. And he could not help but wonder what layers of mastery, of intelligence, of unspoken power would reveal themselves next. The day stretching into evening with Chloe Bennet at the center, a steady force of presence and competence that demanded recognition without a single word spoken. The golden glow of the late afternoon deepened into a warm amber as Chloe Bennet moved toward the back of the cafe, retrieving freshly brewed coffee and arranging it on a tray with meticulous care, the subtle aroma filling the air and drawing appreciative glances from patrons. Daniel Whitman could not tear his eyes away, the combination of precision and grace creating a quiet tension he had never experienced before. She adjusted the placement of a sugar bowl with a delicate touch, aligned the spoons perfectly beside each cup, and every action carried an unspoken authority that demanded recognition without force. Daniel's mind raced, piecing together the image of competence, awareness, and poise that seemed far beyond anyone in a uniform he had ever encountered. The soft murmur of conversation, the gentle clatter of plates. Even the hiss of the espresso machine receded into the background as he focused solely on her, the rhythm of her movements unfolding like a story he was only beginning to comprehend. Chloe paused at a table where an elderly couple lingered over desserts, listening attentively to their preferences, offering subtle suggestions with a voice soft yet firm, conveying understanding, confidence, and warmth. Daniel noticed the way she tilted her head slightly when one of them hesitated, nodding subtly to encourage them. The finesse of her attention to detail striking him with quiet force. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, studying the curves of her gestures, the measured cadence of her steps, the calm authority in the tilt of her shoulders, every movement intentional, controlled, revealing a presence that was far greater than her role suggested. She returned to the main floor, balancing a tray of drinks, glancing briefly at Daniel, the flicker of acknowledgement sending a shiver of curiosity through him. Her eyes held a depth of observation, intelligence, and awareness that made him question how he had so thoroughly underestimated her. He realized she was orchestrating the entire flow of the cafe with subtle skill, influencing the environment, commanding attention, maintaining efficiency and harmony without a single raised voice. Daniel shifted slightly, the weight of his pride pressing against him as he absorbed the full impact of her mastery. Chloe moved again to another table, listening, responding with precision and empathy, guiding patrons through choices with ease, her calm presence commanding respect without demanding it. Daniel's attention never wavered. He found himself following her every step, noting how she adjusted chairs, straightened napkins, ensured plates and cups were perfectly aligned, every act purposeful, deliberate, a subtle assertion of control that he could feel even without words. The warm light reflected off her hair as she moved toward the side station, collecting trays. And Daniel's pulse quickened, awareness sharpened, his assumptions crumbling as he acknowledged the quiet power she wielded. Chloe approached a corner table with a single coffee, placing it gently before a young man engrossed in his laptop, her posture impeccable, her hands steady. her eyes briefly meeting his with a nod that conveyed care and attention. Daniel felt a mixture of admiration and humility, the realization of her capability, her awareness, and the depth of her presence settling around him like a weight. He leaned back in his chair, fingers tapping lightly against the polished wood as he reflected on the meticulousness of her every motion. Chloe returned to the main floor to check on a family near the window, her glance catching his once more, subtle, knowing, unassuming, yet filled with a quiet command that made him aware of the stark contrast between her role and her presence. The cafe hummed softly around them, the ambient noise blending into a backdrop as he absorbed the lesson in subtle authority, in power without display, in mastery without proclamation. She adjusted a chair ever so slightly for the couple, aligned silverware for a young child learning to pour syrup. And Daniel's mind traced the narrative of her day, the careful orchestration of each small act, the deliberate cultivation of order, the command of space and attention that required neither title nor wealth. Chloe moved toward the register to collect the last of her orders before the evening rush, and Daniel noted the smoothness of her steps, the confidence in her eyes, the grace in every motion, leaving him with a profound recognition of the quiet but undeniable mastery she possessed. The subtle yet commanding presence of Chloe Bennet unfolding before him, and as she disappeared briefly behind the service counter, Daniel Whitman remained frozen in place, caught between admiration, disbelief, and an insatiable curiosity, the unspoken question lingering in the air. What further revelations would this quiet force of intelligence and poise unveil next, and how would he measure up in a world where the truly powerful operated in silence and composure? Leaving him suspended in anticipation, the day slowly moving toward evening with Chloe at the center, a steady and commanding presence that he could neither ignore nor forget. The evening deepened outside the cafe windows, the city lights flickering on, casting long reflections across the polished wooden floors, and Chloe Bennet moved with unwavering precision, carrying plates and drinks with a quiet elegance that made every motion seem deliberate and composed. Daniel Whitman remained in his corner seat, observing, noting the subtle shifts in her posture, the way her eyes scanned the room, how she anticipated the needs of each table before a request could even be made. Her fingers delicately adjusted a sugar packet here, straightened a napkin there, each gesture precise, yet effortless, demonstrating a control and awareness that spoke louder than any words could. He felt a growing tension in himself, the mix of admiration and incredulity sharpening as he watched her navigate through the busy space, her presence commanding attention without demand, influencing the environment, balancing efficiency and grace in a dance that Daniel could not interrupt. She approached a young couple, explaining the nuances of the wine list with calm clarity, her voice soft, melodic, imbued with a quiet authority that left them leaning in, absorbing each recommendation with the same care she had presented it. Daniel's mind raced as he traced the layers of skill, observation, and awareness in her every movement. The way she tilted her head slightly when listening, how she gestured subtly to emphasize a point, the minute adjustments of her body communicating competence and presence, and as she moved to the side station to collect empty glasses, he noticed the smoothness of her steps, the rhythm of her day, unfolding like a carefully orchestrated performance, the careful timing of each action, the balance between attention to detail and overall flow. Daniel realized he had been entirely blind to the power and quiet control, the authority Chloe wielded without ever asserting it verbally. She returned to his table, placing a clean cup of coffee with an almost imperceptible tilt, the porcelain aligning perfectly with the edge of the table, her eyes briefly meeting his with a subtle acknowledgement that conveyed awareness of his gaze without a hint of challenge. Daniel felt a flicker of humility, the pride he carried so naturally now tempered by the undeniable mastery in front of him. Chloe moved to adjust a chair at the window table, sliding it just so for comfort, aligning the cutlery for a family preparing to share dessert, and Daniel observed the way every action reinforced her command of the space, her presence shaping the atmosphere, the flow of the cafe, the perception of those around her. He noticed the delicate balance she maintained between professionalism and warmth, the way her voice remained soft but precise, her gestures measured yet natural, the the subtle power of someone fully in control without announcing it. And as she turned toward the counter, stacking plates with effortless ease, Daniel traced the careful lines of her posture, the rhythm of her movements, the attention to detail, the quiet efficiency that conveyed mastery without arrogance. Chloe bent slightly to attend to a child struggling to reach a high chair, guiding hands gently, adjusting positioning with thoughtful care. The small act magnified in its significance, demonstrating awareness, intelligence, and command. Daniel felt an unfamiliar pull of respect and fascination, the lesson of humility and observation taking hold as he realized the true measure of capability often lay in subtle, deliberate action rather than grand gestures. Chloe moved back toward the center of the cafe, balancing a tray of beverages with practiced grace, the light catching the amber hues of her hair, the reflection of the city glinting off her watch. Every step measured, deliberate, fluid, commanding attention. Through presence alone, Daniel leaned back, exhaling slowly, the recognition of her quiet power settling over him like a weight, a sense of anticipation threading through him as he wondered what further layers of mastery, intelligence, and composure she would reveal next. And as she paused briefly to adjust a table for a pair of elderly patrons, her glance catching his once again, subtle and knowing, he felt the pull of curiosity, the magnetic draw of someone who could control a room, influence, perception, and command respect without ever raising her voice. And as Chloe moved toward the kitchen to prepare for the next wave of service, Daniel remained seated, absorbing the full impact of her presence, her intelligence, and the quiet authority that emanated from her, a force both commanding and gentle, leaving him suspended in thought, the cafe alive around him, yet all attention drawn to the meticulous, composed, and quietly powerful figure of Chloe Bennet. The golden hour had shifted into the soft glow of early evening, the streetlights outside casting elongated reflections across the cafe windows, and Chloe Bennet moved with a calm authority, balancing a tray of desserts as if weightless, her steps deliberate, measured, commanding the room with the quiet power of someone fully aware of her surroundings. Daniel Whitman watched from his corner seat, the edges of his suit illuminated by the warm interior light, and he felt a mixture of curiosity and astonishment. Every gesture of Chloe's speaking to a mastery he had underestimated. She approached a table near the window, listening carefully to the questions of a young couple regarding their order, her head tilting slightly as she offered advice with precision and a softness that drew them in. Daniel leaned forward, his fingers drumming lightly on the polished wood, noting the subtle coordination in her movements, the unspoken rhythm that guided every action, every placement, the smooth glide of a plate here, the careful alignment of cutlery there, and the way she managed to command attention without a single word or a raised voice, her presence alone shaping the atmosphere, her confidence unassuming yet palpable. Chloe moved back to the side station to retrieve a fresh set of trays, the soft clinking of glass and silver punctuating the air, and Daniel observed the way she stacked plates with meticulous care, the precision of her hands, the alignment perfect, and he felt a quiet tension within himself, the realization dawning that competence and authority could exist without loud proclamation, that someone could hold command by sheer composure and intelligence. And she returned to his table, placing a cup of coffee gently before him, her eyes meeting his briefly, conveying acknowledgement without arrogance, and he felt a flicker of humility, the kind that comes when one recognizes they have been entirely wrong in judgment. Chloe moved again, attending to a family with small children, guiding them with patient, soft instructions, the timing of her gestures perfect, the subtle encouragement in her voice coaxing smiles and cooperation. Daniel's mind raced as he pieced together the layers of her skill, observation, and foresight, every slight motion, every measured step, revealing a depth he had not anticipated. The subtlety of her command leaving a lasting impression. He noted the way she paused to adjust a chair, the alignment of a plate, the soft placement of a napkin, each micro-action deliberate, a silent assertion of control, and the room seemed to bend slightly to her rhythm, the cafe alive around her, yet dominated in a quiet way by her presence. Chloe walked back toward the kitchen, her posture impeccable, the soft swish of her movements fluid, unhurried. and Daniel recognized the gravity of her influence, the invisible authority she carried, the mastery of space and time in the room. He leaned back, absorbing each detail, each small, deliberate act, realizing that her power did not demand recognition. It commanded it silently, naturally, effortlessly. And as she glanced back toward him, her half-smile subtle, knowing, unassuming, it left him suspended in thought, the acknowledgement that she understood her effect, that she orchestrated her environment without speaking, that she held him and everyone in the cafe in quiet balance. Daniel's mind replayed the unfolding rhythm of her day, the careful control, the intelligence layered within every step, every gesture, every look, and he understood that this quiet mastery was far more formidable than any display of wealth or status could ever be. Chloe moved to collect a tray of empty dishes, her hands precise, the motion fluid, practiced, every action deliberate, and Daniel followed her with his gaze, realizing the subtle lessons of authority, patience, and presence she imparted without a word, each passing moment reinforcing the undeniable strength in quiet composure. The way she commanded attention without demanding it, the skill to shape the atmosphere, to guide perception, to influence without assertion. And as Chloe disappeared briefly behind the kitchen curtain to prepare for the next sequence of service, Daniel remained seated, eyes fixed, absorbing the full weight of recognition, admiration, and humility, aware that her quiet power had reshaped his perception, leaving him to anticipate what other layers of intelligence, control, and presence she would reveal before the evening ended. The cafe alive with the subtle choreography of her authority, and Daniel Whitman silently acknowledged that the most formidable influence often moves unseen, yet leaves an indelible mark on everyone who witnesses it. The evening had settled into a quiet rhythm, the last warm light from the city filtering through the tall windows and casting long, soft shadows across the polished wooden floors. Chloe Bennett moved among the tables with the same deliberate precision that had captivated Daniel Whitman from the start, her hands adjusting cups, straightening silverware, and placing desserts with an effortless grace, each motion measured yet natural, conveying a command of the space that needed no announcement. Daniel observed her from his corner table, leaning slightly forward, elbows resting on the polished wood, absorbing the subtle authority in her every gesture, the confidence that radiated from her posture, the quiet intelligence reflected in the way she interacted with patrons, the way she listened, anticipated questions, and guided their choices without imposing, a blend of patience and presence that created order, comfort, and respect. He felt a growing admiration mingled with a quiet humility, his preconceived notions crumbling as he realized how completely he had underestimated her. Chloe approached a table near the window where a small family was deciding on drinks, tilting her head slightly to listen, nodding with the faintest smile, and Daniel noted the precision in her timing, the careful pauses, the fluidity of her movements that seemed choreographed yet perfectly natural. She offered a recommendation softly, explaining the subtle differences with a clarity that was gentle yet authoritative. Daniel's fingers tapped lightly against the table, his mind racing to reconcile the composed, intelligent presence before him with the image he had formed in his assumptions. Chloe moved back toward the side station to collect empty plates, her steps measured, the tray balanced with perfect poise, her hair catching the ambient light in the cafe, glinting with hints of auburn. Daniel's eyes traced every line of her movement, noting the smoothness of her gestures, the attention to detail, the subtle control she wielded without needing to speak, the quiet command that drew attention through presence alone. She paused to adjust a chair for a customer, nudging it into place with gentle precision. Daniel noticed how every minor action, every alignment of a cup or plate, carried a weight of purpose, the orchestration of the room entirely under her awareness, and he felt a thrill of realization that her authority was intrinsic, earned, and unspoken, a mastery of the environment that surpassed any title or display of wealth. Chloe returned to the floor, setting a tray of coffee before a couple seated near the corner, her eyes meeting theirs briefly, acknowledging their presence, conveying understanding. Daniel observed the calm confidence in the curve of her shoulders, the poise in her stance, the grace in each step, every movement deliberate, measured, fluid, yet unforced. She navigated the space with a silent rhythm, a quiet choreography that reshaped the cafe in subtle ways. Daniel's mind replayed the unfolding scene, noting the intelligence, foresight, and composure layered into every motion, each gesture, each glance, the quiet assertion of power, control, and influence in a world that often measured authority by volume and display. Chloe moved toward the back to retrieve another tray, her movements seamless, fluid, and Daniel felt a quiet tension as he recognized the lesson in her presence, the demonstration of mastery without noise, the command without assertion, the power in dignity and poise. She placed the tray carefully, adjusted a sugar bowl slightly, aligned spoons, and in each act communicated competence, awareness, and authority. Daniel leaned back, exhaling slowly, absorbing the full weight of recognition, understanding. That influence could be exerted without announcement. That presence alone could guide, shape, and command. Chloe's glance briefly met his from across the room, subtle, knowing, unassuming, yet filled with quiet strength. And as she returned to prepare for the next wave of customers, Daniel Whitman remained in his seat, eyes fixed, mind alert, contemplating the layers of intelligence, observation, and authority in her every move, aware that he had witnessed something extraordinary, a quiet force of skill, mastery, and composure that moved through the room like a silent conductor, shaping the atmosphere, guiding perception, and leaving a lasting impression on all who observed. And the thought lingered in him, unspoken, that the most powerful influence is often subtle, quiet, and entirely unseen, yet its impact is undeniable, leaving Daniel captivated, intrigued, and anticipating what further mastery Chloe Bennet would reveal as the evening continued. The cafe had quieted as the evening crowd thinned, the warm amber light reflecting off the polished wooden surfaces, and Chloe Bennet moved with the same deliberate precision that had captivated Daniel Whitman from the moment he had arrived, her hands arranging cups, straightening napkins, and placing desserts with an effortless grace, each motion controlled, each gesture intentional, conveying a silent command of her environment. Daniel remained in his corner, leaning forward slightly, elbows resting on the table, absorbing the subtleties of her presence, the way she scanned the room, anticipated needs before requests were made, adjusted chairs and silverware with perfect alignment, every movement demonstrating a mastery he had never expected from someone in a uniform. The gentle murmur of the remaining patrons, the distant hiss of the espresso machine, and the soft clatter of plates faded into the background as he focused entirely on Chloe, the rhythm of her actions unfolding like a carefully orchestrated performance. She approached a table near the window where a family lingered over their desserts, listening attentively, offering guidance with a calm, steady voice, her tone soft yet imbued with authority, encouraging without imposing. And Daniel's mind raced, piecing together the depth of skill, observation, and intelligence in her every action. Chloe moved back to the side station to collect trays, her steps fluid, measured, graceful, and he noted how the light caught the auburn highlights of her hair, the polished reflection of the silverware, the faint glint of her watch, each detail adding to the impression of mastery. She returned to the main floor with a fresh tray, placing a cup of coffee gently before a young man working on a laptop, her eyes meeting his briefly, conveying acknowledgement without a hint of condescension. Daniel felt a stir of humility as he recognized the quiet authority she wielded. She moved to adjust a chair at a corner table, sliding it into place with meticulous care, aligning utensils, ensuring comfort, and in those subtle acts, demonstrated control and attentiveness that shaped the atmosphere of the cafe. Every step she took, every small adjustment, carried significance, conveying awareness, intelligence, and command. Daniel leaned back, absorbing the full impact of her presence, the lesson of influence through composure, authority through subtlety, unfolding before him in real time. Chloe moved to serve a couple seated near the window, explaining the choices of desserts with clarity and patience, guiding them through their decision with soft gestures, nods, and subtle emphasis. Daniel noticed how each action reinforced her command of the environment, the way she balanced warmth and professionalism, efficiency and grace, shaping the space around her with effortless poise. He traced the lines of her posture, the rhythm of her steps, the precision in her hands, each deliberate yet fluid, a silent assertion of power that needed no recognition. Chloe paused briefly at the register, checking a list of orders, adjusting a chair, straightening a tray, and Daniel observed the depth of her attention to detail, the seamless coordination of tasks, the quiet control she exerted over the flow of the room, the awareness of every patron, every movement, every potential disruption. She glanced at him momentarily, subtle, unassuming, yet radiating a quiet confidence that left him captivated. Daniel realized that her influence extended beyond the visible, that the command she held over her environment, over perception, over the rhythm of the cafe, was both effortless and profound. He leaned back slightly, exhaling, acknowledging internally the lessons of humility, observation, and the subtle power that Chloe Bennet embodied. Each movement she made reinforced the undeniable presence she carried, shaping the space, the experience, and the attention of everyone around her. And as she moved toward the kitchen to prepare for the next wave of service, Daniel Whitman remained seated, transfixed, aware that he had been witness to something extraordinary. The quiet mastery, the deliberate poise, and the calm authority of Chloe Bennet leaving an indelible impression, the kind that altered perception, commanded respect, and left him silently anticipating the next revelation of her intelligence, composure, and influence. As the night continued to unfold, the soft glow of the city lights streamed through the tall windows of the cafe, casting a warm reflection across the polished wood floors as Chloe Bennet moved with the same calm precision that had captivated Daniel Whitman for hours, her hands steady as she carried plates of desserts to a table near the window, each step deliberate, measured, conveying a quiet authority that commanded attention without demand. Daniel remained in his corner seat, leaning forward slightly, eyes tracking every motion, the subtlety of her control, her awareness of the space, and the care in her movements, leaving him both fascinated and humbled. She adjusted a chair for a patron, aligned cutlery, and straightened a napkin with a flick of her wrist that seemed effortless yet intentional, each gesture reinforcing the undeniable presence she held over the room. The hum of conversation and the faint clatter of dishes fading into the background as Daniel focused entirely on her. Chloe approached a table, where a young couple deliberated over the dessert menu, tilting her head slightly, listening intently, and responding with guidance that was gentle yet firm, her voice soft but carrying a calm authority that made the couple lean in. Daniel noted the way she balanced empathy and professionalism, her movements fluid, rhythmic, and perfectly timed, the rhythm of her day unfolding like a subtle dance of efficiency and grace. She returned to the main floor, placing a fresh cup of coffee before a patron without spilling a drop, her eyes briefly meeting Daniel's, a quiet acknowledgement of his observation that did not seek approval or recognition, and he felt a flicker of humility, the recognition that her mastery lay not in loud assertion but in deliberate, precise action. Chloe moved back toward the side station to collect empty plates, the soft clinking of porcelain punctuating the air, and Daniel traced the lines of her posture, the curve of her shoulders, the fluidity of her steps, the meticulous attention in her hands, each action speaking volumes about her awareness and command of the environment. She paused to adjust the position of a chair for a couple seated at the corner, aligning cutlery with careful precision, every small adjustment asserting control, shaping the perception and experience of those around her. Daniel exhaled slowly, absorbing the lesson of composure, influence, and quiet authority unfolding in real time. The subtlety of her power striking him more than any display of wealth could. Chloe moved to the counter to prepare for the next set of orders, stacking plates and lining up utensils with impeccable precision. Daniel observed her from across the room, noting the rhythm of her day, the seamless flow of movements, the intelligence layered into each gesture, each tilt of the head, each glance, and he understood that true mastery did not require announcement. It commanded attention without words. Chloe returned to serve a table by the window, offering guidance to a family with patience and clarity, adjusting chairs, aligning utensils, and speaking with a voice that carried calm authority. Daniel's mind raced as he pieced Together the layers of observation, foresight, and composure in her every action. The subtle orchestration of the room under her quiet control, each step she took shaping the atmosphere, guiding perception, asserting mastery. And as she moved back toward the kitchen, Daniel remained in his seat, transfixed, eyes fixed, taking in the deliberate elegance of her movements, the careful attention to detail, the balance between warmth, efficiency, and authority, understanding that influence could be exerted silently, the impact profound and undeniable. Chloe Bennet commanded the space, guided the flow of the cafe, and left a lasting impression on everyone present, and Daniel could not help but wonder, anticipating what further displays of subtle mastery, insight, and composure she would reveal as the night continued, each movement, each glance, each measured action leaving him suspended in fascination and deep respect. The cafe had dimmed further as the evening progressed, the soft glow from hanging fixtures blending with the twinkling city lights outside. Chloe Bennet moved through the room with unwavering precision, her steps fluid, deliberate, and commanding a quiet attention that went unnoticed by most but impossible to ignore for Daniel Whitman. He leaned forward, elbows resting on the polished wood, absorbing the cadence of her movements. The way she adjusted a chair for an elderly patron, aligning cutlery with exacting care, setting a small cup of espresso at a perfect angle, every gesture measured, each motion purposeful, and he could feel the subtle authority radiating from her, the room seeming to bend slightly to the rhythm she created. Chloe approached a table where a young couple debated dessert choices, listening intently, tilting her head with subtle attentiveness, offering guidance in a calm, measured tone that communicated knowledge, confidence, and composure without demanding acknowledgement. Daniel's mind raced as he noted the depth of awareness in her every movement, the precision in her timing, the careful orchestration of gestures that ensured the flow of the cafe remained smooth, the soft hum of conversation, the distant hiss of the espresso machine, the clinking of cutlery all fading into the background as he focused entirely on her. She moved to the side station to collect empty plates, stacking them with exacting care, lining up utensils with precision. The reflection of light catching the auburn tones in her hair, the subtle glint of her watch emphasizing the poise and composure that accompanied each motion. Daniel felt an unfamiliar mixture of admiration and humility, the realization that her quiet mastery had been entirely underestimated gnawing at his pride. She returned to the main floor, placing a plate of dessert before a patron with perfect balance, eyes briefly meeting his, a flicker of recognition passing between them without words, the weight of her unspoken authority settling over him. Chloe moved to adjust a chair at the window table, sliding it into position with small, deliberate movements, aligning silverware, ensuring the patrons were comfortable, and Daniel noted the subtle control she exerted over the space, each motion reinforcing the sense of mastery, influence, and awareness she possessed. She approached a family at another table, listening patiently, guiding them through decisions with a soft but confident tone. Daniel observed the rhythm of her day, the seamless flow from task to task, the balance between efficiency and grace, and he could not help but marvel at how her quiet authority shaped the perception of the room. She paused briefly to collect a tray of beverages, adjusting the placement of cups with delicate precision, her movements flowing effortlessly, every step measured yet natural. Daniel's pulse quickened as he recognized that her command of the environment, of timing, of attention, and influence was entirely hers, unspoken yet undeniable, the lesson of subtle mastery, of authority without proclamation, settling over him as he absorbed each carefully executed action. Chloe moved toward the back, retrieving fresh plates and lining up utensils with impeccable care, her eyes scanning the room, anticipating needs before they were requested, her awareness of every patron, every motion, every interaction complete. Daniel leaned back slightly, the weight of recognition and respect pressing lightly against him as he reflected on the quiet power Chloe wielded. She returned to the floor with a tray of coffee, placing a cup before a young man working on his laptop with the same flawless poise, her eyes meeting his briefly, conveying presence and attentiveness. Daniel marveled at the combination of grace, skill, and intelligence layered in every gesture. She moved back toward the center of the cafe, attending to a family with careful, precise movements, each adjustment, each tilt, each placement reinforcing the subtle assertion of control that defined her day. Daniel exhaled slowly, absorbing the full impact of her quiet authority, her awareness, and the seamless mastery of her environment. And as she disappeared briefly behind the kitchen curtain to prepare for the next set of orders, Daniel Whitman remained in his seat, transfixed, the lingering impression of her composure, intelligence, and influence leaving him captivated, anticipating what further layers of mastery Chloe Bennet would reveal before the night ended. The room alive with the understated command of someone who understood that true authority is silent, deliberate, and profoundly effective. The cafe had grown quieter as the evening deepened, the soft glow of the pendant lights blending with the reflections from the city streets outside. And Chloe Bennet moved through the tables with a calm authority that made every motion deliberate and precise, her hands adjusting cups, straightening napkins, and arranging plates with a quiet grace that drew the subtle attention of those nearby, without demanding it. Daniel Whitman watched from his corner, leaning slightly forward, his eyes tracing each motion, every tilt of her head, every pause and gesture, noting the balance she struck between efficiency and warmth, precision and empathy, and he felt a rising sense of awe mixed with a humility he had not anticipated. Chloe approached a young couple who were debating their dessert choices, listening intently, tilting her head slightly to acknowledge their hesitation, her voice soft, measured, yet confident, guiding them through the options with clarity and subtle authority. Daniel observed the way she managed the space around her, the flow of the room, the attention of every patron, her presence shaping perception without a word, every movement deliberate, purposeful, and controlled. She returned to the side station to collect empty trays, stacking them with exacting care, lining up utensils with flawless precision, the light catching the auburn highlights in her hair, the glint of her watch reflecting the calm mastery she exerted. Daniel's mind raced, realizing that her quiet power was far greater than he had ever assumed, that the authority she wielded was intrinsic and undeniable. Chloe moved back toward the main floor with a tray of coffee and a small dessert, placing them gently before a single patron, her eyes meeting his briefly, acknowledging his presence without seeking recognition. Daniel felt a wave of humility and admiration, the lesson of subtle authority settling over him. She adjusted a chair for an elderly couple, sliding it into perfect alignment, straightening silverware, tilting a cup slightly for optimal placement. And every micro-movement reinforced the quiet assertion of control she carried effortlessly. Daniel's pulse quickened as he noted the mastery of her environment, the anticipation of needs, the seamless flow of her actions, each motion layered with intelligence and awareness, the cafe itself seeming to bend to her rhythm, the ambient hum of conversation and the clatter of plates fading into the background as he focused solely on her. Chloe moved toward the corner table, placing a plate of dessert and a cup of coffee with perfect balance. Her posture impeccable, her gestures fluid and deliberate, conveying composure, poise, and authority without a single spoken claim. Daniel exhaled slowly, absorbing the weight of recognition, the understanding that mastery could exist without noise, without display, only through careful, deliberate action. She guided a family through their choices at another table, her soft words precise and confident, her attention measured, encouraging engagement without imposing. And Daniel noted how each slight movement shaped the atmosphere, influencing perception and interaction, her calm control threading through the entire cafe. Chloe returned to the side station, gathering trays and lining up plates with meticulous care, her eyes scanning the room, anticipating the next task, her awareness of every patron, every interaction, complete and unfaltering. Daniel leaned back slightly, absorbing the lesson, recognizing the profound impact of quiet authority, subtle mastery, and deliberate composure. She moved again toward the floor, placing coffee and desserts with grace and precision, adjusting chairs, aligning utensils, all executed with an unspoken understanding of space, timing, and influence. Daniel felt captivated, the subtle command she exerted over the environment, resonating deeply, each gesture, each glance, each pause reinforcing the undeniable power of presence, the careful orchestration of the room, the quiet influence that required no words, no announcement, no display of status. Chloe paused briefly to adjust a table for a couple near the window, sliding the chair into place with exacting precision, and in that instant, Daniel recognized the lesson fully. That true influence is silent, deliberate, and profound, shaping perception, commanding attention, and leaving a lasting impression. She moved back toward the kitchen to prepare for the next wave of orders, her steps fluid, measured, unhurried, every motion purposeful, and Daniel Whitman remained in his seat, eyes fixed, heart alert, absorbing the lesson in mastery without proclamation, composure without claim, the quiet authority of Chloe Bennet resonating through the space, leaving him captivated, humbled, and profoundly aware that the most enduring influence often passes unseen, yet its impact shapes every person who witnesses it. And he wondered silently, anticipating the next layer of insight, poise, and mastery she would reveal as the evening continued, the cafe alive with her subtle command, her presence shaping the environment, guiding perception, and demonstrating that quiet power is often the most compelling and unforgettable force of all. The night had settled fully over the city, the streets glowing with soft amber light and the quiet hum of the evening wrapping around the cafe. And Chloe Bennet moved with her familiar calm precision, each step deliberate, each gesture measured, yet filled with warmth and presence. Daniel Whitman watched from his corner table, the tension he had carried all day slowly easing as he absorbed the depth of her quiet authority. She adjusted a chair at a table near the window, aligning the cutlery with subtle care, the soft clink of silverware punctuating the stillness of the room, and Daniel realized that every movement she made was both an act of service and a statement of dignity. Chloe returned to his table with a final cup of coffee, setting it gently in front of him with perfect alignment, her eyes meeting his briefly, conveying a mixture of acknowledgement, kindness, and composure. And in that glance, Daniel felt a sense of humility and clarity he had not known he needed. She moved toward the counter to gather the last of the empty plates, her movements smooth, fluid, the faint glint of her watch catching the ambient light, and he noted the effortless grace with which she managed the space, the patrons, and the flow of the cafe. The quiet mastery of her environment impressing him more than any display of wealth or authority could. Chloe paused for a moment, looking around the room, her expression calm yet confident, and Daniel observed the way she subtly ensured that every patron felt attended to, every table orderly, every action intentional yet graceful, and he felt a profound respect, a sense of justice in the recognition that competence, patience, and integrity could create influence without a single demand or assertion. She returned to a table where a young couple had left a note of thanks, smiling softly as she collected the empty plates, the gesture conveying care without expectation, and Daniel understood the emotional power of presence, the way someone's composure and thoughtfulness could leave a lasting impression far beyond a single interaction. Chloe moved back to the center of the cafe, aligning a tray of utensils one final time, her posture upright, movements deliberate, yet fluid, the embodiment of calm dignity. Daniel leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly, feeling a weight lift, a clarity settle over him, as he recognized that her influence had not been about status, money, or power, but about the subtle assertion of integrity, skill, and care, the kind of quiet mastery that commanded respect effortlessly. The cafe itself seemed to breathe with the rhythm she established, each gesture reinforcing the sense of balance, fairness, and attention to detail that she cultivated without words. Chloe glanced at Daniel one last time, the faintest smile on her lips, serene, composed, unassuming yet undeniably authoritative, and he met her gaze with a deepened understanding, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them, the lesson of humility, respect, and quiet dignity settling firmly within him. She moved toward the kitchen to finish her shift, the soft click of her shoes on the polished floor echoing like a gentle punctuation, and Daniel remained seated, eyes following her until she disappeared behind the service counter, absorbing the emotional clarity and the sense of justice in witnessing someone fully inhabit their competence and presence. a feeling of closure and satisfaction washing over him as the quiet authority of Chloe Bennet left the cafe, the room humming softly, orderly, and alive with the residual impact of her meticulous care, the patience and composure that had guided the day and shaped every interaction lingering in the ambient space. And Daniel leaned back, shoulders relaxing, the subtle moral settling in his chest. That true strength is measured not by wealth or display, but by the quiet dignity and integrity with which one moves through the world. And as the city lights shimmered against the window panes, he found himself reflecting on the profound effect of a single person acting with unwavering grace, the quiet power of presence and intention leaving a lasting imprint that would remain with him long after the cafe had emptied. And if this story touched you, consider sharing your thoughts or experiences below, or subscribing to follow along with more stories that reveal the strength, dignity, and quiet mastery in the everyday.